Most teachers like to wait 2, maybe even 3 years before they start teaching students vibrato. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't start learning it sooner. It doesn't mean that you've got to learn X, Y, and Z before you start learning vibrato. Really, teachers wait a couple years because they don't trust you to practice vibrato responsibly. And they're afraid if you start learning vibrato too quickly, that you'll actually slow your progress down instead of helping it. And they know by the time you get to your 2 or 3, hopefully you've got a good enough grasp of the basics that you won't hurt your progress too much by learning vibrato. But I think you can start learning vibrato sooner. And in fact, I think it's a good idea. Because if you wait 2 or 3 years before you start learning vibrato, you're going to realize some things that you could have fixed earlier on. For instance, you may realize you've got a death grip on the fingerboard with your left hand, or you may realize your thumb's not really in an ideal position. And if you start experimenting with vibrato, you're going to notice all of those things, and you'll be able to iron them out and fix them before you start incorporating vibrato into your normal practice routine. If you want to be successful at vibrato, and you don't want it to slow your progress down, then you have to adhere to what I call the 3 rules of vibrato practice. Now, if you don't adhere or follow these rules, then vibrato will be more frustrating, it's going to take longer to learn, and it's going to slow down your other practice and your other technique. So the number 1 rule is practice vibrato alone, by itself. Don't add vibrato to other items in your practice schedule. Now, I like to think of this as building a house. If you were building a house, you might be working on the foundation and the frame, but that doesn't mean you couldn't also have someone working on the kitchen cabinets at the same time. You can work on both separately. But the problem comes if you get your kitchen cabinets pretty much finished and you try to put them in your house before, say, you have a roof on your house. Well, you know those kitchen cabinets are going to be ruined pretty quickly. And the same applies to vibrato. You can work on both things separately. You can work on your basic technique, your foundation, the frame of your house, while you're working on your cabinets, your vibrato. But the problem comes when you try to put the vibrato to your normal practice routine too early. And that's when the vibrato doesn't help anything. It actually tends to hurt your progress and hurt your playing more than it helps. So the number 1 rule is practice vibrato alone. Don't add it to your practice routine until you're ready or until your teacher gives you the go-ahead. The second rule is that you must practice vibrato less than you practice your basic technique. And by basic technique, I mean scales, open strings, where you're focusing on tone production, bow control, intonation, all of those foundational aspects of violin playing. And I think you should practice these in a ratio. If you're spending 5 minutes on vibrato, let's say, you should be spending at least 3 times that much on scales and open strings. And that way you will be able to focus on the technique and you won't get frustrated or overwhelmed with vibrato. And again, you can think of it in terms of building that house. If you spend 10% of your time on the foundation and the frame of your house, but you spend 90% of your time on those cabinets, well, you're never going to have a house to put the cabinets into, so the cabinets aren't really going to be worth much to you at all. Same thing with a vibrato. You want to have a house to one day add the vibrato to. The third rule of vibrato practicing is that there are certain areas of your practice where vibrato are never allowed, no matter how good you get. And you can think of this again in terms of the house. If you take your kitchen cabinets and you put them right in the middle of your bedroom, they are not going to be very useful. In fact, they're going to get in the way and be pretty annoying. And it's the same thing with vibrato. There are certain areas where vibrato will do nothing but hurt your practice. And the first item is scales. Even I never use vibrato while I'm doing scales. I'm using that time to focus on my bow, my intonation, getting warmed up. Now, the only exception is that if I'm trying to work on vibrato, specifically, and I want to just do a scale, something easy to allow me to focus on the vibrato. That's the only exception. Now, there are a couple other places where vibrato is not allowed, and that's when you're first learning a new song or a new piece. You want to be focusing on rhythm and intonation and bow control again. You don't want to get overwhelmed with trying to add vibrato when you're just learning something new. So you want to leave vibrato out until you're relatively comfortable with a new piece. The other time vibrato is not allowed is when you are doing slow, concentrated practice on a specific passage or a specific section of a song. Especially when you're doing really slow practice for intonation, which I strongly recommend. Don't confuse things by adding vibrato. You want to just focus on whatever the problem is that you're trying to iron out, whether it's string crossings or your second finger on your left hand. You don't want to add too much to where you start getting frustrated and confused. So when you're doing slow, focused practice, no vibrato on that as well. And if you adhere to those 3 rules of vibrato practice, I guarantee you're going to learn vibrato quicker. Your basic technique is going to continue to advance, and you'll be able to add the two together much sooner.